Good evening and bright moments. Welcome to Jazz Couples. I'd like to thank NJ Pack for presenting this event. I'd like to thank the TD Jazz Series at NJ Pack for sponsoring the series. I'm your host. I'm Dorthaan Kirk, and for some of those that might not know me, I am a retired employee of WBGO, the greatest jazz station in the world. I'm also one of the 2020 recipients of the NEA Jazz Masters Award. We thank you for joining us, and we hope you're going to enjoy tonight's presentation. Several years ago, during the T.D. James Moody Jazz Festival, we presented a similar form, and we focused on jazz wives. Tonight, we're focusing on jazz couples. So this should be very interesting. You will have a little peek into their lives before you see them on the bandstand. So I'm going to introduce them, and they will tell you a little bit about themselves. First, let's see about T.S. Monk and Gale Monk. So which one of you want to go first and just give a brief bio of your life to our public? Gale, you want to go first?
Sure.
Okay.
I have had the honor for 42 years to represent the catalog of Thelonius Monk and manage his music internationally, as well as work with my husband and his band and book gigs for him.
Thank you. T.S.?
I'm T.S. Monk. For those of you who don't know, that stands for Thelonious Monk, and I'm actually Thelonious Monk III. The guy that everybody loves is actually Thelonious Monk Jr. He's the second, and I'm a drummer, and I've been a producer. When I was younger, I was an R&B artist, had some luck with some hits back then. 1980, I was the R&B New Artist of the Year. In subsequent years, along with my sister, by the way, who is dearly departed. And in subsequent years, in 1992, I actually became a real jazz artist, although I played with my father for the last 5 years of his career. But I decided that I really wanted to be a jazz artist, so I formed the T.S. Monk Band. And I've been, I've been a drummer band leader for 27 years, and there ain't a whole bunch of us. So I'm very proud of that fact. And I also manage my father's legacy. I was the chairman of the Thelonious Monk Institute of Jazz for 28 years. And I'm just a busybody. Most recently, I just produced a archival recording of my father called Thelonious Monk Live at Palo Alto. And I'm just having a good time.
Great, and thank you so much for joining us. Why don't we talk to Steve and Iqua Colson next?
Oh, well, Steve Colson, pianist and composer, and I'm from Newark. I was born in Newark and grew up in East Orange here. So I went to Chicago to study music out in Chicago and met a lot of great musicians out there. Actually met my wife, Iqua, out there while I was going to school. And, we just have to practice a lot because the keyboard was difficult for me, although I had a great teacher. He was actually a rehearsal pianist for people at the Metropolitan Opera. So he rehearsed like Richard Tucker and Roberta Peters and people like that. But I branched off into improvisation and not really looking back.
Thank you, Steve. Iqua?
I'm Iqua Colson. I'm a Chi-Town girl. I've lived in Jersey, moved out here with him, let's see, maybe 37 years ago. But when people ask me where I'm from, I say Chicago. Born and raised, always a Chicago girl. We met at Northwestern School of Music, and he had started a band on campus when I got there called The Life and Death Situation, because he got there in the 60s and that's what they were going through on that campus. I got there in 71 at the tail end of his time there. So, but I'm a vocalist. I went into Northwestern as a piano major. A lot of people don't know that about me. But I'm a vocalist, and I've had some of the great divas say to me, Nancy Wilson, I'm blanking on her name.
Lena Horne.
Lena Horne,
Abby
most notably,
Abby
and Abby Lincoln say to me, oh, you married your piano player. Good move. It really wasn't like that, but it did work out that way. And we've had a partnership where we work together and individually in music performance. Steve is a composer, me lesser so, and in education, because if we don't keep the young minds popping, they won't even know what's out there for them to be involved with and learn about.
Thank you, Iqua. And last, but certainly not least, Brenda Feliciano and Paquito D'Rivera. And I'm happy to say Brenda serves on the WBGO Board of Trustees. So I have history with her in more ways than one. Thank you all for joining us. You decide who goes first.
I go first? No, you go first.
Yeah,
You go,
yeah,
okay. All right. Well, what can I tell you? We have been together for how many years? 40 years, my God. I am a saxophone player, a clarinet player, composer. And I am very happy to be here in such a great company. And married to a woman that, being an opera singer, she loves jazz music. You know, that's a great combination. So, and also she correct my Tarzan English in many occasions. And well, sometimes we do projects together. She produce or she sing the projects. It's, well, what can I tell you? It is no business like show business. I am very happy to be here in the company of these wonderful people and the company of my beautiful wife. What do you have to say now?
Well, I'm very happy to be here. I was born in Puerto Rico, by the way. I am not Cuban, but I grew up listening to jazz.
Nobody is perfect.
I grew up.
They like that, you see that?
I know. So I grew up listening to jazz, and I studied music, of course. I went to music at high school, then got scholarship. I went to study in several schools, and eventually did theater, did concertizing, worked on radio. I worked in the production of commercials on television and radio for the Hispanic market. And at some point, when I was with Paquito, his manager, Helen Keene, passed away and so on. This is a short story, but anyhow, so somebody suggested that I take care of his business. So I ended up being a manager. I didn't want to do it, but I had worked with Chico Farrell before, being his sales rep, and we produced, you know, a lot of commercials for television and radio, and a lot of music with some of the best jazz musicians around. So I've been around music, jazz music, which I love, but also, you know, classical music and opera, of course, and I've sung with major symphony orchestras. And I've done a lot of classical theater and worked in films and commercials and so on. I mean, you know, but, you know, music is the one that's kept us together. And because jazz embraces our culture, you know, this is why we're all here. And we got to take care of this art form. It's beautiful. It's love. Jazz is life. Jazz is our life. So thank you for having me here. And, you know, let's just swing.
Thank you, Brenda.
My pleasure.
And here's how we're going to do it. I have a few questions that will apply to everybody. And then I have individual ones. And Iqua has already kind of touched on the first question. Would you like to just talk a little bit more about how you and Steve met? You are a Chicago native. He was going to school there. Could you just briefly say how you met each other and eventually fell in love, married, and you moved to New Jersey?
Okay.
Confess.
Well, and I have to say, we actually got married, as my mother made sure, asked the minister, because of course we did our own ceremony because it was 1975. And we were very much into the Afro-American aesthetic. And our mothers bonded and became the best of friends over what are they going to do in front of all of our friends. But we had been together for several years. We had started performing together. As I said, he already had a band on campus, which was the jazz band on campus. Another person who the jazz world's probably familiar with is Chico Freeman, and he was in that band as well. And this was what I knew I wanted to do. Northwestern had no jazz department. Both of us were expected and our parents wanted us to go to college. So we went in as music majors to sharpen our skills, but we had to learn this music on our own. And of course it had been playing in our homes the whole time we were growing up. But we joined forces and you can't necessarily plan a life, you have to be prepared. So as things opened up along the way, we found ourselves involved in different aspects of education. We moved to Jersey. We have one son born in Chicago, one born in Jersey. We moved to Jersey in the early 80s, I guess. At that point, Steve had already had a major compositional work under his belt, had been commissioned. And so we just kind of developed as we did individually and collectively. We started our own record label in 1979, because one thing we learned in talking to many of the people who have been mentors and advisors along the way is this is our music. We need to be in control of it. Gale is a good friend and I admire so much, she knows the work she and Toot have done to take hold and make sure that that family is in charge of that great music and that great catalog. So what we have done is work through producing ourselves, booking ourselves, working with different managers or agents, but basically working on things ourselves, and formed a career that way. And doors open, you go this way, another one opens, you go that way.
Right, thank you. You kind of getting off into some of my other areas. Gale, I know you met T.S. very young. You want to talk about how you all met?
Sure. One of my oldest friends is the nephew of Sonny Rollins. He is a great musician in his own right. His name is Cliff Anderson, trombone. And he's a Martha's Vineyard cat. We met up there in the summers as kids, and he joined Toot's band. I guess he's 1 year older than I am. I guess I was 18. And I went to the rehearsal. And that's how I met Toot.
You know what? I have to jump in here.
Okay, go ahead.
Because
I'm not
you met
surprised.
me, Gale met me during my R&B days. And the first day she came to my house, my mother said to me after she left, "That girl's going to be trouble for you."
No, what?
Right?
Oh,
Okay.
man.
Okay. So dig, but you got to dig. So then, a little time went by, and I wanted to date her, and she had become very close friends with my sister and my previous girlfriend, my ex-girlfriend, who were both part of the first T.S. Monk band, but she wouldn't see me, right? And she was an intern at CBS Records, and she wouldn't see me. So I started sending, now she's an intern. I'm sending her these giant bouquets of flowers every single day. And I said, she's gonna have to react to me. And eventually she had to react to me, and she had to give me a date, because everybody in the office was saying, who is sending this girl, who's sending this intern these flowers every day? And she finally saw me, and the rest is history.
I know she was, all I remember is she was very young when she met you.
Yes,
Now, Coquito,
Yeah.
we had a conversation the other day, and I don't remember exactly when you came to the US. You said that what I saw on the internet wasn't correct. So, would you share when you came from Cuba to the US, is that when you met Brenda, or had you met her on a previous trip when you performed in the US?
No. It's a very interesting story. I came here in 1980, October 1980. And then in the following year, I was performing at a wonderful club that probably TS remember that club, called the 7th Avenue South.
sure.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The Brecker brothers.
The Brother Brothers.
Brecker Brothers Club.
That was all by the Brecker Brothers. All the musicians used to go there. It was so much fun. And Helen Kim got me a gig there, playing there. I remember that the bass player was this guy who played with Manhattan Transfer. They are two brothers. That was so much fun. And then in between sets, in those days there were 3 sets. In the middle of the first tempo, I received a call. Paquito, you have a call. Somebody's calling you. Then I said, me? Yeah, okay. And that was a recording session that my very dear friend, Mario Rivera.
Of course.
Yeah, Phoenix Daddy.
That's Phoenix's father. Yes.
For some reason, Mario didn't show up. Went to Dominican Republic. He was playing some merengue. I don't know. Mario didn't show up, and then the sound engineer told the guy who was in charge of the recording.
I was producing the recording.
She was producing the recording.
I call him. Okay, I call him and I tell him, Mary hasn't shown up. This guy told me that Paquito had just come in. He's famous. I didn't know who the hell he was. So anyhow, the thing is, what time do you finish? It pays this much and so on. And that's how we met. He came in all spiffy with this 2 double-breasted jacket and everything. And, it was love at first sight.
I love it.
You know what he did? He said, I don't read music that much. Can you please hum in my ear so I can hear the melody when he went into
That's so funny.
And I was like, so I didn't pay any attention to him. So he wanted.
You didn't pay any attention to me?
No.
That's not what I remember.
So his grandfather was a very elegant man and dressed him and sent him clothes. So he was dressed. I mean, he didn't look like he came from Cuba. He looked like, really dapper.
Like a dandy, yeah.
Yeah. So anyhow, he asked for and I didn't pay any attention to him. And
look at that. You didn't pay any attention.
And he tried getting in touch with me for 6 months. And I just wasn't around. I was busy. I was living in Manhattan Plaza. I was involved in recordings. I was involved in theater and so on. And it was because somebody had given him, another musician there, had given him, I won't mention the name, the information inverted because this other musician didn't want him to contact me. And, That's how we met. But,
Okay,
and then the rest
okay.
is history.
That was fun. That was fun.
The next question is for the wives, and it might be kind of a two-part question. So here goes. If you had a career and changed it to work with your husband, did that impact what you had started to do? And if so, how?
Oh, yeah.
Who wants to go first?
I can
Gail,
go.
how about you?
Oh, well, I was teaching, I went to City College. I have an undergrad degree in broadcast journalism, but I started teaching, had our daughter, and then by the time I was pregnant with Thelonius, he said, you know, I was doing Monk stuff kind of on the side. He said, do it full time. And from that moment, our son is what, 32? So at least for full time, I've been managing the estate.
Wow. Wow.
Any regrets? Would you, if you had to do it over?
No, I think, you know, in the case of my mother-in-law and my father-in-law, if Nellie didn't travel around the world with Monk, I don't know if he would have been Monk. It was crucial, it was essential that she was with him.
Mhm.
My attitude was, if I'm not there to make sure they're getting 100 on their spelling test, what's gonna happen? So there
Right.
were many times I didn't go with him. Now, when it was a beautiful event, like when we go into Japan or, you know, Hawaii, yeah, you know, I was on that trip. But really, it was important that
Iqua, I know you have a great background in education and so on and so forth, but I also know you sang with the AACM. Did marrying a musician impact your original career, or did it work out better than you had planned?
It worked out, I think, the way it was supposed to. I went to Northwestern School of Music mainly. I mean, I did, after my junior year of high school, I was able to get in. So I went there. I knew I loved jazz, but I got in as a pianist, playing all the classical stuff you play to get into School of Music in 1971. Originally, I met Ade and several other people on campus who were upperclassmen. I know my girlfriends from college are watching and thinking, you know, you didn't go out with him right away. And that's the truth. He was an upperclassman. He was having a good old time, and I wasn't going to get involved with that. However, as time developed and we started doing some work together in that band he had, the Life and Death Situation, our relationship developed. And we both, with the caution of our parents in our ears, were picking up education courses. So after a while, all of these things kind of come together. In Chicago, we did a lot of performing, but we also started to travel internationally while living in Chicago. We started the record label I mentioned, but I think education was always in there. We would do artist residencies. In 1980, the NEA decided they were going to fund a think tank led by the great bassist Larry Ridley. And they took about 20 musicians from across the country to Duke University to plan how artist residencies were going to be rolled out from the NEA. Ade was one of those musicians. Hence, he has remained in education from that angle. And I think things, you know, just unfold. I mean, we hung up a calendar one year and we told each other by the end of this year, we're going to be living on the East Coast. So we went that summer overseas, as we often did in July, landed in his parents' house for the month of August, hanging out with all our friends in New York. And I said, maybe I should just whip out my credentials and go see if I can get a job teaching music in East Orange, his hometown. And that's what I did. As you know, Dorthaan, that grew and grew. And as I was ready to step away, we had a visionary superintendent who wanted to do arts themed schools. And out of that grew what is now a few blocks from your home, Dorthaan, the Cicely L. Tyson School of Performing and Fine Arts in East Orange, which Thelonius and Gale, of course, I've pulled in my buddies to come in and show these children how great this music is, to teach them this music so that, as Brenda said, it continues. That's part of, I think, our mission. But I had no idea that I would be an educational administrator. But when it happened, all the experiences of producing and performing and all that came together.
Great, thank you. Brenda.
Yes, dear.
How were you impacted by starting to manage Paquito?
Well,
Did managing him interfere with what you had planned for your career?
Well, it's a 24-hour, you're on call all the time. It's almost impossible to do other things, and I kind of did them, but it's not, you either do one or the other, you know, and you have to take care of your home. So this was very important, of course, you know, so that I felt that it was important to take care. I mean, you're talking about, you know, we started our own record company. We started looking into how publishers, you know, the intellectual property of musicians really, you know, slips out of their hands, and people do all kinds of projects. And then, you know, 20 years, 30 years later, you don't own any of that. You don't get any royalties. You see somebody else is getting it and all this stuff. So a friend of ours who had suggested that I become involved in this said, keep it in the house. You know, which is, I really felt I wasn't, you know, I mean, I'm still learning, but at least I care, because unfortunately, you know, nobody can take care of your business more than, you know, in-house family, as opposed to lawyers and these institutions that are for profit mainly, and you have to, you know, deal with all of that. So, you know, I did some opera, I did theater and so on, but it required a lot of preparation, and just it is you can't really do it unless you have help, and you know, it was just so it's I kind of, as full-time work right now, we have a streaming Pac-Man's Corner, and there's so many things going on, you know, and it requires that you're dealing with it constantly. So you can't have two. It's almost impossible. You either work business in the house or you work separately. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. You can't. It's at least for me, you know.
Got it. This is for TS and Steve. Now, you all were traveling musicians, and TS, I know you and Gale have 2 children. I forget how many children you and Iqua have, Steve, but this is 2 also. This is my question to the 2 of you. When you were traveling on the road, no doubt you missed, you know, recitals, football games, helping with homework, etc. Tell me how much of that you were actually able to do with your children, and also, do you have any regrets that perhaps you couldn't have done more? I know that's a loaded question because you had to make a living.
Yeah.
Yes, you first.
I have no actual regrets because, you know, with my kids, although I was gone, when I was home, you know, I really did the daddy thing, you know, and I did stuff with my son with, you know, camp and, you know, all the little things that you can do, and played basketball with him. And of course, I'm a technocrat, so I had lots and lots of gadgets, and I taught him how to use everything. But, you know, I told both of my children when they were very, very young, I said, your grandfather is not just regular famous. He's kind of special. And, I'll tell you that he was a great musician, but I'm going to have to rely on you to discover who he was, because he relied on me to discover who he was, because I didn't know who my father was till I was 19 years old, And I said, I don't want to make it a millstone around your neck. So I'll let you grow into it. And my daughter, I remember when she got in her early teens, she went to a summer camp at Princeton University. And they started calling her the jazz princess. And I think that's when she first started to understand that there was something going on with her grandfather. And of course, my son, being Thelonius Monk IV, I told him, I said, look, man, you ain't never going to be able to escape this name. So now this name can be a millstone around your neck, or it can be a magic carpet ride for you, like it's been for me. And in the last decade, both of them, who are in their early 30s, discovered who their grandfather was. And now my daughter, she tells me more about my father than I know about my father. And my son is so protective of my father's legacy. I can't believe it. I mean, he will take me to task in terms of protecting granddaddy's legacy. So I'm very, very pleased with how things turned out. They have a merchandising business. My daughter handles all the social media for both me and my father's legacy. And it's been wonderful for me. So, my growing up was convoluted. I mean, it was unbelievable. I mean, if you grow up in a house, and who's coming to the door every day? Well, Dizzy Gillespie's coming to the door, and Max Roach is coming to the door, and John Coltrane's coming to the door, and Miles Davis is coming to the door, right? And Sonny Rollins is coming to the door, and Horace Silver's coming to the door, and it just went on and on and on and on. And my father, right, he wouldn't tell me who anybody really, really was. So I didn't know who anybody really, really was. It was just daddy's friends, and they all seemed a little crazy, but he seemed just a bit crazier than all of the rest of them. And they treated him like a god. And I didn't know why, and I started playing drums when I'm 15, right? And he says to me, you're late, right? And then he never said a word to me about music until 5 years later when he told me I was in his band. So I took that model with my own kids and let them discover who their grandfather is. And now they are completely immersed in his legacy. And that's what I always wanted, because Thelonious left something behind that is precious. He left his music behind. He left his character behind. He left his ideology behind. And that's something that is filtered down from jazz to pop musicians to doctors and lawyers and people all over the world. And my kids have a good handle on it. So I'm very, very pleased, although I couldn't be there all the time.
Great, thank you. Steve, what's your experience? I know you and Iqua had a son, I believe, that attended Yale, but was it Yale? I don't remember the other one. So you must have done something right, but would you like to share as a dad your role in your son's life, your children's life?
Well, yeah, our first son, yes, he went to Yale, and our youngest son went to Harvard. But the thing I did was, we traveled a lot together. So it was tough on that end, because where some people may split, a lot of times we would be traveling together, and then we would also have to take our oldest son with us, or that type of situation. Later evolved so we could take both of them. But that was hard because I think, like Brenda was saying, you still have to take care of things at home. So we found ourselves both out of the house, both traveling around. And then when we came back, we would still be on the East Coast for maybe 3 weeks before we went back to Chicago. So that was going on for a while. But generally speaking, therefore, it allowed us to remain, a unit. So when I would talk to the kids, she would still be there anyway because we're traveling together. So a lot of times we spent time talking around the dinner table and tried to make sure that conversation was inclusive of whether it was math or science or what did you do today or did you notice anything on the news, and what books are you reading, what is your teacher telling you to do, and so on and so forth. So I remember one time we got out I used to ask my oldest son, I used to ask him little math questions, right? Like, what is 5 times 5? What is 6 times 7? And we'd go through that. He wound up getting a perfect score on his SATs in the math area. So he turned out to be a total math head, right? And so it was great. He wound up doing those big trades on Wall Street. In fact, he rang in Wall Street one day on TV. We looked up, he was ringing in Wall Street. So that was very good. And but I found that it was mainly about just communicating and constantly having communication. So that would take place generally around dinner. And in terms of other things, they started to get interested in the music. They were like, well, what are you doing in terms of because we'd be practicing in the house and things like that. So they said, well, what's that? How are you going to make that liner notes? Who's going to do your album cover? They would start to ask questions like that. And since we were doing a lot of it ourselves, they knew some of the people that we were having to do that type of work. But I think it kind of gave them the idea that they needed to be self-reliant because we were also in the AACM. And that was about being self-reliant. The musicians would set up the chairs for the concert. The musicians would sell the tickets. The musicians were writing their own music. So a lot of it was being self-sufficient. And so I think they picked that up. But I wouldn't really trade anything because even when they got older, we wound up going to Egypt and, they were riding camels and things like that. And I said, well, sort of like what Monk said, this is an experience that you're not going to have every day. So you better enjoy it or, take in that experience while you can and understand that it's not happening for everybody like that. So, appreciate. So main thing for us is even like with the music, I'm so appreciative of the people that mentored me or have, played with us or that I've been allowed to play with, because it's a lot of a difficulty in terms of breaking through sometimes. Because, the guys know in the old days, in fact, hung out with Max quite a bit. And he was like, look, they would pay us with a bottle of liquor. Like we'd be in the club and you'd go to get your money and the guy would say, well, here's a bottle of Jack Daniels, be happy. Mm. And, so guys had to go through these kind of things. So I'm just trying to enjoy it, or, sometimes they would pass off bad money or they wouldn't pay you at all. So
it didn't happen to us.
Yeah, because we were on a tour and the guys
and other people
and some other guys, and they gave them counterfeit money and all that kind of thing. So it's a slippery slope, but you try and maneuver as best you can. But I think, like Iqua said, it's kind of turned out the way it should.
Well, you guys have done a great job. I've got a bunch of questions, but I know I asked you and TS, but Gale, you traveled a little bit with TS, did you? What about your children when you were traveling and you were a mother, you were helping with homework, you were managing TS and so on and so forth. How did you organize that, or when did you decide, well, I'll go on this road trip or I'll stay home? Could you just share a little bit of that?
Of course. I was so blessed because my mother took my kids for me the entire time. There was once we went, it was one of the first educational trips we did with the Monk Institute. And it was in Dolo, which is about 30 minutes outside of Venice. We were gone for, I would say, 35 days. My son was maybe 7 months old. I was still nursing. My mother kept, and so Sierra was what, 3.5? They lived on Martha's Vineyard. We drove them up here, and I'm telling you, I'm in the driveway just dancing. Toot is crying. You know, you remember that, don't you? But I was so lucky because my mother kept my children from me. And so they were always safe. And, you know, on the important or trips that I wanted to go on, she was there for me.
Well, great. Paquito,
Yeah,
you're
I'm still here.
I just love you. You're the greatest. When you left Cuba and came to the United States, not because from what I've read and know about you, you seem to have been doing really well there. So what made you want to come to the United States, and
I
was
would,
that the best move for your career?
I will tell you, it's an interesting story. I wrote a book called My Sax Life,
Mm-hmm.
mainly because I want to explain how come back in the mid 50s, my father, who was a classical saxophone player, he never had the ability to improvise, but he loved Lester Young and Stan Getz. I don't blame him for that. And he came home with a recording of Benny Goodman at Carnegie Hall, recording that was made in 1938, but according to Josh Avakian, who was the producer, the recording didn't come out until 1956. So we used to play, my father used to play classical stuff at home, and then he played that. And I say, what is that? And he say, that is swing. He loved that word. Very seldom he used the word jazz. That is swing music. And it was so fantastic orchestra that Benny had with Teddy Wilson, the piano, and Jim Krupa, and Lionel Hampton, and all fantastic. And then he told me, that is swing, and that is the city of New York, and that is Carnegie Hall. When he said Carnegie Hall, I understood carne y frijol. That means, that means meat and beans. No. Carnegie Hall is not carne y frijol. It's different. And ever since I started transcribing all the solos in that, I used to play the chord soprano saxophone. And I start copying all those solos, but not only Benny's solo, Tus Mondello's solo, even Teddy Wilson lines on the piano, and of course Lionel Hampton. For me, it was like a dream come true the day I went to the stage with Lionel Hampton. I started crying, and Lionel said, "We are going to pay you." That was like a dream come true. All my life, I dreamed to be a musician, because I do different styles of music. To be a musician in the city of New York, you know, and I celebrate my 50th anniversary as a musician in Carnegie Hall, at Carnegie Hall in 2004. So it's like a dream come true. Always I wanted to be a musician here, because when you move to New York City or around the city, you can have many countries in one. It's like traveling all over the world in just one little island. You know what happened in this city in one day, not in one island, in one day, can happen in any other city in the world in 2 or 3 years.
Right.
So
I have a question for all of you. Maybe you want to answer as couples or individually, but the question is, how has COVID impacted your personal lives as well as professional lives? So who wants to go first? TS.
Sure. You know, the thing about jazz, and one of the reasons I think it's been so difficult for jazz in terms of education, teaching jazz, and it's taken a long time to get it as sophisticated as it is now, it's because jazz is really a hands-on live thing. It's something that you have to do. You can learn a lot of classical music from a book. There's very little jazz you can learn from a book. You have to play. And the impact of COVID on the jazz community as a whole has been devastating because we haven't been able to actually play. When I was an R&B artist, you know, you could spend 6 months in the studio making records and feel very satisfied. But for a jazz musician, if you can't play, if you can't interact with your fellow musicians, that's like the whole ball game. So for me, the impact has been devastating. I would suspect that it has been just as devastating for my brothers here on this Zoom call, because we all are really live musicians. You gotta play jazz to do it well. You just have to play. You can't sit around, and we've all been sitting around. It's been devastating.
What about all the streaming that's going on? I'm bombarded with
Oh, yeah.
all the streamings. What about that?
Streaming, yeah.
I don't know, Paquito, because I know you have a streaming thing going. How do you feel about the streaming? Because for me, the streaming it's nice, but it ain't like, you know, it ain't like playing with Paquito D'Rivera. You know, that's some serious stuff right there. And you can't fake it.
Paquito, how do you and Steve feel about that?
It's terrible, you know, but all these disgraces, I don't find another or another word, misfortunes that happen in life produce positive things. Why? Because you have to reinvent yourself.
Yes.
You have to reinvent yourself. If this is what we have, you know, it's nothing like playing with other people and all that, but you have to reinvent yourself. And people, they invented this thing that you call Zoom. And some people do some recordings at home and sound like in the studio. It's amazing. But you don't have to, you have to forget about, it is nothing like playing together with other people.
Right,
You know?
right.
It's like ordering food. No, you have to go to the restaurant with all the friends, and this is totally the feeling of gloriously, you know, to be together with so many musicians, inspired by other people. But well, you have to reinvent yourself. And always I say, I never work more and I make less money than these days. I'm eager to play. So, man, there is not any money here. Okay, so I will pay you if you want, but I want to play something.
Gale, from all of the things that you, of course, you can't book TS anywhere now, but the other business that you do, has that impacted or been impacted, or is it business as usual? And the same thing for you, Iqua, beyond the booking gigs, how's the other side of the business?
I'll just say briefly, go ahead, Gale, go ahead.
I will say this, we've had obviously many less gigs, but he has done several from home where he worked with the musicians, and it seemed to me like he enjoyed it, and the students certainly got a lot out of it. We are really, unlike many musicians, because recordings of people that are deceased were so very popular this year. You couldn't really get in the recording studio to be live. So some of these historical recordings have done very well, including our album Palo Alto. Excuse me. But as Paquito said, you have to reinvent yourself. Paquito, I bought some Zoom stock. Let me tell you something, baby. That's the way to go. But I think that you're just going to have to find new ways until we're over this pandemic.
You know, I would have to say also that I have been very fortunate in that I do control 95% of Thelonius's catalog. And so I've had a lot to do, in this time, in this downtime when I haven't been able to play live. I've been doing a lot of publishing business. Thelonius is a bit of a brand, as a matter of fact. So, we've initiated and introduced a wine, which has got a 94 rating by Wine Tasters Magazine, by the way. And we have a beer, and my kids have all of this merchandising going on. So I've had a lot to do, but I have to say that I'm very fortunate in that regard. So many of my brothers and sisters in jazz have been really hanging out there because they don't have all of that to do. And so earning a living has become very difficult, and I found myself in the same position as Paquito, whereas like, I've never done so much for so little money.
Well, I
It's
think,
unbelievable.
Do something.
But
I think that when we talk about this pandemic, my husband has a saying, something he said to me probably 45 years ago, and it rings true. Pressure makes diamonds. And so we find ourselves home. We write, we collaborate. When the pandemic first hit, he was finishing a commission. So he just went was writing and whatever. But then we had to quickly learn, because we're both involved in education. He's teaching on the college level, how to work this Zoom and everything. And a fellow pianist said to him, well, how are you teaching piano on Zoom?
Yeah.
Right?
That was difficult. That was difficult. Yeah.
But it's just about the right angle, setting the piano up. He's sitting at the grand and he turns and he talks and he plays and so on and so forth. It's been but we've been writing. We've been polishing off some projects. I think, often you wouldn't call me Ade's manager. We work together on a lot of stuff, but sometimes when he has projects, I will step in. Amiri Baraka wrote in liner notes that we were over in Paris and we were doing one of his big pieces. And he said Iqua was basically the producer, even though I was singing in the piece, but I would get in rehearsals, get up, move around, do whatever, because his head is into the music and the musicians in front of him and how he's conducting them. So I'm pulling up the other stuff that has to be done. And we work like that. And so being home, we're just looking at things that we wanted to complete, projects that are coming down the pike. People, I know early on, you did something with some musicians online and it was.
Oh man, it was rough because it wasn't, they couldn't align the beats together. But, the technology is kind of catching up. But I would say, unfortunately, on the human toll side, we've lost some really great musicians because of this pandemic. So that's been kind of upsetting to me. A couple of really, really wonderful people, but
Wallace, yes.
Wallace, yeah. In fact,
hard.
I'd been hanging out with Wallace for several months playing because he was only about 10, 12-minute drive from me. And so that was kind of rough. Ralph Peterson just stepped out of here just a little bit ago. So,
but he had been ill for a few years, not a couple.
But there is one silver lining. There's one silver lining to this pandemic, and both Steve and Coquito will understand what I'm saying. Once you become an established musician, the hardest thing to do is practice.
Yes.
Because you never have no time. And the one thing we have all had is time to practice. So I predict when this pandemic is over, a lot of people are going to be playing their behinds off.
Yes.
Brenda,
exactly right.
Do you want to give your version of what how COVID has impacted you?
Well, you have to become.
Or maybe it hasn't.
No, it has. It did.
Okay.
Oh yeah, no, it's been extremely difficult, but we have to be relevant, and you know we have a community that relies on us, and particularly Paquito. So Paquito has had several commissions from symphony orchestras and ensembles. He has been, you know, we developed the Pac-Man's Corner, which we produce. We are taking archival recordings and putting them out and creating you know, like historical little vignettes of the history, because being that we speak Spanish, but the whole thing of how jazz has all of these elements, and we are part of those elements, and how they, you know, they are all connected. And so we're doing that. And now we're trying to do, Paquito is doing some what is it called? Master classes online with conservatories, and musicians will play his music, and then he will, you know, he will critique and play back. But now we're going to start this. We're downloading this program. It's called Gemilus, and that's supposed to be a really good program where you can play it live and it really syncs. We're going to try it out, because if you can do that and have a small ensemble, that really will revolutionize, because a lot of people can do some live concerts from home while we're still, you know, dealing with this pandemic. I mean, given our age, we couldn't really go out and be exposed because of our health histories, you know. So because I know some young people have gone out and they do clubs and so on. So we've had that challenge to be present, and I think we are very much present online, streaming and doing it, but it's been very difficult. And, you know, we've had very dark moments, but, you know, the music keeps you alive. That's the whole.
Right. Iqua, earlier when you were given bio on yourself, you spoke about the Cicely Tyson School. And of course, I worked with you presenting the children's concert series when I was working for WBGL. Can you just share a little bit of what's happening with the kids over there right now?
Well, they're still all virtual. I'm supervisor of arts, so what I've tried to do is bring resources that the 70 arts staff members can use across the district. Excuse me, there are 16 artists teaching at Tyson Middle High, and 5 artists teaching at Tyson Elementary, and it is a campus. And they have done a superb job of continuing with instruction in the pedagogy. We've got every major. We've got TV and film. We've got music, vocal and instrumental. We've got strings and harps. We have, you know, a jazz band, an orchestra. Then we've got dance and visual art. We're now working to put together our art celebration, because we're not going to let another spring go by when we don't present the students, and we're thinking of how to do it. And you mentioned, Brenda, software. Some of the software is catching up with us. So it allows, like Steve's talking to a friend who lives in Switzerland about them playing together with a bassist that lives here in the States, but in another state. We're also working with the students. And they, of course, they're more tech savvy. The teachers are trying to catch up, but these teachers are amazing musicians and visual artists and dancers and theater practitioners by themselves. And then they bring all that to the students. Short story, several years ago, we had a visionary superintendent who saw using themes as a way to engage our students. The town of East Orange is pretty much just what you would at this point say it's the African diaspora. We have students from all various countries, Black countries, African Americans, you know, who have been here, whose parents have been here for generations. And so it's important because arts touch every part of it. Now everyone is concerned with SEL, social emotional learning. That's what the arts do. And so, as I've said to my teachers from the beginning, make sure you get on with them and look at them and engage them, because most arts people teach children for more than 1 year. Like if you're in English 3, you have an English teacher for 1 year. But if you're a music major at Tyson, you are with your teacher for 4 years, sometimes 7. And so the school continues on. Of course, we lost Miss Tyson. She was very, very involved at the school. She only let us name it after her with the condition that she could be involved. So yes, involved. So, and that's devastating, but the kids, especially the ones who were there at the beginning, they have a very, very close tie to her and her work. And some of them have gone on to be artists. You know, it's been very gratifying because I didn't think I'd be in education this long, tell you the truth, just working on a daily basis. But the school is moving along, and I'm sure arts instructors, whether it's college or whatever level they're working on, have been doing what they need to do to keep pushing the young people and expanding their horizons, their experiences, so that they can figure out who they are.
You know,
Okay.
I just have to say,
Go ahead,
I
Tia.
want to, for all your listeners out there, that
Mhm.
Iqua involved me with the Tyson School more than a decade ago. In fact, when they were in the old building was when I started out doing things at the Tyson School. And I want everyone to understand that the Tyson School is one of the finest reservoir of arts teaching in this country. And my hat is off to you, Iqua, and you, Steve, that you have developed the arts in that school. So that school is about the arts in every single way. And I have seen some performances at some of your festivals that are absolute. I mean, they rival Broadway. They really, really do. So I just want everybody out there to know that what goes on at the Tyson School is really, really special.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Tia.
And that's
And
because we have people like you coming in to work with the kids. This one here, East Orange is his home. So I really had nothing to do with him being involved. The principals and the superintendents realized, oh, wait a minute, he went to school here. And they brought him in, and he's been working with that jazz program for a while with, of course, you're very familiar with. So, I mean, it's gratifying because the next generation is very important. Our own sons, and by the way, your kids, they have the arts in them. Now they're studying genealogy and gene pools and all this, and it's in their genes that they're artists, and both of them are manifesting arts, whether they're, you know, the oldest one left Wall Street a long time ago. They're manifesting that in their art, and we just want to give it to as many young people as we can.
well, thanks for all you do over there. And it is a state of the art. When I worked with you, when I was working for WBGO, the technical guys just loved it when I booked the concerts there because everything was just great. I think I'm supposed to start ending this around 8:15 or so. So I want to ask, I think everybody this, there are several young couples now who are the same as you all. They are either both players or the wife is involved in the husband's business some kind of way, and she has a daytime job, and you all might know who I'm talking about, somebody in Philly. So there are still young couples that are coming along today. So I have a two-part question. Do you think life for them will be better? That's assuming we can go back to some normal way of living after COVID. Do you think that? And the other part is, what advice, if any, do you have for them? Got it?
Well, you know, I would just say I think it should be actually better because like when we were starting out, and anybody can know that there were no cell phones, there were no laptops. Now you've got the Instagram, you've got Facebook, you know, you've got so many avenues that you can put out, and the information has been out also as to you know, how to accomplish some things. So I think it really should be better. But that's just my opinion. But I think there are a couple of people that I have in mind that you mentioned it, Dorthaan, but hopefully.
Yeah, there are quite a few of them. Mhm.
Yeah, it should be better. I would think it would be better for everybody, actually, like what Monk was saying. It should be, when we come out of here, we'd be practicing, it'd be like crazy how good we'd be playing, you know.
I would like to insert
Okay, go ahead.
that they should look for their own voice.
Yeah.
One of the things that disturbs me about jazz education on the college level, people have to find their own voice. I mean, we were in college, then we went down to the club on the South Side, and a very well-known musician named Vaughn Freeman said to me, we're going to get up here on this stage. When they were Night in Tunisia. He said, when we hit the break, it's you. I'm like, what? But that's how you learn the craft. And the AACM, of which we're both members, the whole mission is to develop your own music, your own sound. So you can study with the masters, but where is your voice? Because just playing the same licks as other people you read out of a book, that's not it. So I think that's their challenge, whereas it was wide open, we got the training, and then we learned how to interpret and get into this music that we loved. But I think with the social media, which I'm like scuffling with, my thing with my sons is this is your world and I'm just trying to live in it. So I think they are working that quite nicely, the younger folks. They're working that quite nicely and expanding their audience internationally just through social media.
Yeah. Well,
Gail?
You know, and it's interesting because of the three couples, I'm the only non-musician in the group. But it was interesting what Steve said. The technology obviously was not where we are today. Paquito and Brenda talking about trying to learn the new software, that, you know, these new applications. So there's so many more ways that you can get the music, learn the music, and develop the music. But also what you say, Iqua, is find your own voice. I know my father-in-law has hundreds of recordings of the same song, but he plays them every time differently. He found a most unique voice and be original with it. And I think that those are ideas, concepts that certainly have to be helpful to the younger generation of musicians.
Well, you know, I have something to say. I am convinced that after this pandemic is over, it's going to be a lot better. At least we don't have Trump anymore.
That alone, very,
You want something, you want something better than that or what?
I would say to, you know, any young couple in jazz that just understand that everybody's nuts. And so so everybody has to let everybody be themselves, because that's a fundamental principle of jazz, is to be yourself. It's the hardest thing in the world. And I think often people break up in jazz because they don't understand. Couples break up because one of the parties doesn't understand that there's a individuality that goes along with being a jazz person, that everybody has to take note of that and respect that. And the great couples, I'm saying, because before us, you know, you had Hamp and his wife Gladys, you had Diz and his wife, you had Max and Abby Lincoln, you know, and they all understood that everybody is nuts. And if everybody understands that everybody is nuts, then it can work out for 30 and 40 and 50 years.
You know, there's something to be said for marrying a musician if you're a musician. Because I actually had a musician come say to me, I want to take Steve on tour for 2 weeks. Is that okay with you? I said, take him. All you have to ask me. I understand that is what he does. He works with other people. And I think that's important. And part of his mission and his goals is to have those influences. So absolutely, somebody who understands that you're going to practice and you know. And you try to do it in a way where you're doing if you're going to have a family or not, or whatever you're doing, if you're going to stay together this amount of time, if you're going to be stuck in the house in a pandemic, choose well.
Right. This question is a question that we are all wondering, and it'll be the last question. How do you see the future of jazz? And this is for all of you, with clubs having closed and so on and so forth. How do you think, just within your own minds, the future of jazz is? Who wants to go first?
May I? Yes. The music came out of such adversity, yet we were able to overcome. I mean, from the beginning in New Orleans to depression to civil rights movements, we somehow have survived it. And so I am convinced that the music will most definitely survive, as well as future clubs this pandemic.
I think there is such a thirst for musicians to perform live. It's going to come back with a bang, and people are going to cooperate, and they're all going to put it all together, and it's going to be even better and greater, because this incarceration, as it were, is going to come out through the music, to the improvisations, through all the performances that artists have to express. I mean, that's the way you express your feelings, and jazz is the highest art form. To be able to do that, I think we're going to be okay. I think people are in the right mode to cooperate and to really make and take care of these venues that we must keep open. Yeah.
Brenda, can I just add one more thing, Dorthaan?
Go ahead.
So they've been asking people, what do you miss most during this pandemic? Some people say going to a sporting event. Most people have said going to a concert.
Nice.
That's what they crave doing as soon as this is over. So absolutely, it's going to be better than ever.
Hey, listen, I believe that jazz is as healthy as it has ever been. I think that through the work of myself and all the people that work with me at the Monk Institute for 30 years, and what Wynton Marsalis was doing at Lincoln Center and is doing at Lincoln Center, what Nathan Davis was doing down in Pennsylvania, what David Baker was doing at the University of Indiana. Jazz education is as healthy as it has ever been. If you look around at the high school level, most high schools today in the United States of America have a jazz band program, which did not exist when I was a kid. And I say jazz is like roaches. You know, roaches will be here. They always tell you, if you have a nuclear bomb, the roaches will survive. They have tried every way in the world to shut jazz down. And think about this. Think about this. Duke Ellington and people like Thelonius Monk and people like Miles Davis, and the list goes on. You know, I was just listening to Eddie Palmieri's music today on the radio. You know, this music, so much of it was created 50, 60, 70, 80 years ago. 80 years ago, and it's still on the shelves. You cannot say that about any other genre other than European classical music, which came from Europe. When you're talking about America and you're talking about jazz, it is timeless. They will have jazz when they go to Mars in the year 3020. In the year 3020, there will be somebody on that spaceship will have their equivalent of an iPod, and they will have John Coltrane playing Giant Steps on that iPod. I guarantee it. I guarantee it.
All right.
I agree. That's why I don't like that. That's why I don't like that say jazz is too good to America. That is not true. Jazz is good enough for America. This is our music as a great invention. You know, maybe it's not as popular as other types of commercial music, but it's like roaches. We are there forever.
Forever.
The name of one of our great drummers is Max Roach. So
That's
My
right.
teacher, that was my teacher. That was
Right.
my teacher.
Okay. Anyone have anything they just want to share in general? We have we have about 10 more
I
minutes.
got my vaccine today.
good.
We got ours.
Okay. I just want to thank you, Dorthaan, because there's so many things that we heard over the airwaves and so many times that we had interactions with you. I remember you actually the one that booked us to be on the stage with Abby Lincoln. And like you say, with the Jazz for Children. So thank you so much. You're a great NEA Jazz Master. And
Absolutely.
I just want to salute you for the time and energy that you spent and that you still spend.
Thanks.
I remember when you came through Chicago with Rahsaan, and we got a phone call and we actually played. That was when you all were coming back from the West Coast. So we've known you for a long time, but really appreciate you.
And I'd like to say thank you, Dorthaan, because you were married to one of the greatest musicians we ever had, who was also a great, great civil rights advocate. And a lot of people don't know that about Rahsaan, but Rahsaan put it in his music, and he talked about it all the time. And you were there with him to the nitty-gritty end, and we appreciate that because you allowed us to actually experience Rahsaan Roland Kirk. And for all those folks out there who don't know who Rahsaan Roland Kirk is, you better check it out. You want to talk about a cat? You want to talk about a cat who could play 3 horns at once? 3 horns at once. He could do it.
Well, now that you brought it up, TS, with his activism, NJPAC is presenting a program, and I'm embarrassed, I can't remember the date off the top of my head, but it's on their website, and it's later this month. It's with the Community Engagement Department. It's called Jazz and Justice, and they're going to focus on the jazz and people's movement. You all might remember that. I don't think Paquito would know because he wasn't in the United States yet, but that's when Rahsaan, Billy Harper, Lee Morgan, and all of them, they disrupted the TV shows. And because it was protesting no jazz on TV. So there's going to be a panel discussion on that later in March. So having said that, I want to thank NJPAC for presenting the program tonight. I want to thank TD Bank Jazz Series at NJPAC for sponsoring it. Thanks to all of you who listened. And I will tell you, I have gotten inquiries from people seeing the PR about this event, and they're suggesting more of these happen, but that's up to NJPAC. So again, I just want to thank all of you, everybody that tuned in, and I'm wishing everybody many bright moments. All of you know I say that. I've been reprimanded during COVID for saying bright moments, and I always say the glass is always half full, and no matter what is going on, you can find a bright moment. So bright moments, and everybody stay safe, and I will see you all somewhere else again.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Dorthaan.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Paquito.
Bye.
Take care, Paquito. Take care, Steve. Iqua.
Hey, y'all.
Paquito, Brenda, Gale,
Gale.
Two,
Hey, Two.
and Dorthaan.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody, for listening.